What if I told you I only chose 3 people? Not 300, not 30, 3. And somehow you're one of them. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. And it's definitely not random, because I don't choose based on comfort. I choose based on capability. Most people want to be liked. I'm looking for people who can handle pressure, people who don't panic when things break, people who don't need applause to keep moving, people who understand that the future doesn't wait. It gets built. If you're here, it means one thing. I see something in you, not potential. Potential is cheap. I see execution. And today, we're going to talk about what that means. Because being chosen isn't a compliment, it's a responsibility. Selective focus is misunderstood. Most people think growth comes from expanding outward. More contacts, more meetings, more conversations, more validation. But expansion without precision is chaos. If you try to move everything, you move nothing. Real momentum begins the moment you decide that access is limited. Time is finite, energy is finite, cognitive bandwidth is brutally finite. And yet most people distribute these resources like they're infinite. They answer every message, they entertain every distraction. They give equal weight to opinions that haven't earned it. That's not generosity. That's inefficiency. If you want exponential results, you cannot operate on democratic attention. You have to allocate focus like capital. Every person in your circle either compounds your trajectory or dilutes it. There is no neutral. Influence is never neutral. When I say I chose only 3 people, it's not about exclusion. It's about optimization. Small teams move faster. Small circles think clearer. When the room is small, accountability is unavoidable. There's no hiding behind noise. No blending into the background. No outsourcing responsibility to the group. Most organizations fail because too many voices create friction. Friction slows execution, and execution speed is the ultimate advantage. If something matters, it needs clarity. If it needs clarity, it needs fewer inputs. Precision beats consensus. Selective focus also forces depth. When you divide attention among dozens, relationships stay surface level. Surface level alignment collapses under pressure. But when your circle is tight, understanding becomes sharper. Expectations become explicit. Standards rise. It's similar to engineering. If you design a system with too many dependencies, failure points multiply. Complexity increases fragility. But when you strip away unnecessary components, the system becomes resilient. Human dynamics follow the same principle. There's another uncomfortable truth. Not everyone is meant to go where you're going. That's not judgment. It's physics. Different people operate at different frequencies of ambition, risk tolerance, and resilience. If your environment tolerates mediocrity, your performance drifts toward it. Standards are contagious. Selective focus is about protecting standards. It means saying no more than you say yes. It means declining opportunities that don't align with the mission. It means resisting the ego boost of being accessible to everyone. Scarcity creates value, not just in markets, but in attention. When you choose only a few, every interaction matters more. Conversations become sharper. Feedback becomes direct. There's less emotional padding and more intellectual honesty. And honesty accelerates growth. This approach also forces self-evaluation. If you're limiting your circle, you must justify your own place within it. You can't demand high performance from others while operating casually yourself. Small circles magnify inconsistencies. They expose weakness quickly. That pressure is productive. The world rewards focus disproportionately. Look at any breakthrough. It wasn't built by a scattered mind. It was built by obsessive concentration, directed at a specific problem. Obsession requires elimination. Elimination requires discipline. Selective focus is not isolation. It's alignment. You don't cut people off because you don't care. You narrow your field because you care about the outcome more than the optics. The mission becomes the filter. Every person, every commitment, every collaboration passes through one question. Does this increase velocity? If the answer isn't clearly yes, it's no. That level of decisiveness feels extreme in a culture addicted to inclusion and constant connection. But extraordinary results are extreme by definition. Average outcomes come from average distribution of effort. When your circle is small, trust scales faster, speed increases, noise drops, decisions sharpen, you move from reacting to engineering. And once you experience that clarity, you realize something powerful. The strength of your future isn't determined by how many people are around you, but by how aligned the few beside you are with the direction you refuse to compromise on. Intentional connection is rare because most connections are accidental. They form out of convenience, proximity, shared comfort, or mutual benefit. But when someone is chosen deliberately, the dynamic changes. Selection introduces responsibility. It removes randomness. It creates expectation. If you are chosen on purpose, it means someone evaluated your character, your resilience, your trajectory, and decided you are an asset to a mission. That is not a casual compliment. It is a calculated decision. And calculated decisions come with weight. Most people want opportunity without obligation. They want access without accountability. But intentional connection eliminates that loophole. When you are selected, you are no longer just participating, you are representing. Representation changes behavior. It forces self-awareness. Your output reflects not only on you, but on the standard that allowed you in. That pressure is not meant to intimidate you. It is meant to refine you. When I say you're on the list, it implies trust. And trust is expensive. It is built slowly and destroyed instantly. Being chosen means someone believes you will protect that trust even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Intentional relationships operate differently from social ones. They are not built on constant affirmation or emotional maintenance. They are built on shared direction. The bond is not comfort, it is commitment. And commitment survives friction. If you are part of something deliberate, your actions cannot be passive. You cannot drift. You cannot operate on autopilot. Every move contributes to momentum or resistance. There is no neutral setting in a mission-driven environment. This is where responsibility becomes visible. It shows up in preparation, in discipline, in how you handle setbacks. It appears in whether you raise standards or lower them when pressure increases. Most people reveal their character when things go wrong. Intentional connection assumes you will rise instead of retreat. That assumption is powerful. It creates a psychological contract. You are trusted to carry weight, not avoid it. Being chosen also means you are expected to challenge, not emotionally, intellectually. Agreement with O. Thought is useless. Intentional connection values friction that improves outcomes. If you see a flaw and stay silent, you violate the purpose of your selection. Responsibility includes courage. It takes courage to disagree constructively. It takes courage to admit mistakes quickly. It takes courage to maintain standards when shortcuts are available. But that is exactly why the circle is small. Fewer people means each person must be strong enough to hold their ground. There is another layer to this. Growth is no longer optional. If you are chosen for where you're going, stagnation becomes a liability. You cannot rely on who you were when you were selected. You must continuously upgrade. Skills, thinking, emotional control, endurance. Intentional connection is dynamic. It evolves. If you stop evolving, you create drag. Responsibility also means protecting the mission from distraction. It means filtering noise before it contaminates focus. It means guarding the culture of the circle. Energy matters. Attitude compounds. Negativity spreads faster than excellence. If you are one of the chosen, you become a stabilizer. When others feel uncertain, you project clarity. When stress rises, you increase composure. That steadiness multiplies confidence across the group. And here's the truth most people avoid. Being intentionally selected removes excuses. You can't claim ignorance. You can't claim accident. You were brought in because you were believed to be capable. That belief is both empowering and demanding. Empowering because someone sees strength in you. Demanding because now you must prove it consistently. Intentional connection is not about proximity. It is about shared responsibility for a shared outcome. It means your success is interconnected. Your discipline affects others. Your preparation influences collective speed. When you accept being chosen, you accept the obligation to operate at a higher level than comfort would naturally allow. You accept that average performance is no longer compatible with your position. You accept that your role is not to consume the mission, but to carry it forward with deliberate, relentless accountability that never asks for permission to rise. Most people operate within adjustable expectations. If they're tired, they lower the bar. If the environment is relaxed, they relax with it. If others perform at an average level, they calibrate themselves accordingly. Radical standards reject that flexibility. When excellence is the baseline, effort is assumed, preparation is assumed, discipline is assumed. You don't celebrate showing up. You celebrate solving the problem. The difference is massive. Average performance hides inside comparison. If you're slightly better than the majority, you feel accomplished. But the majority is rarely building anything transformative. Competing against mediocrity guarantees mediocrity. Radical standards remove comparison and replace it with objective metrics. Did it work? Did it scale? Did it push the boundary? There's no emotional cushioning in that framework. Results either meet the threshold or they don't. This mindset forces precision. If your standard is extreme, you can't afford vague thinking. You define what good actually means. You quantify performance. You measure outputs. Clarity becomes mandatory because ambiguity protects weakness. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because their standards fluctuate. They accept almost. They accept good enough. They accept partial execution. Over time, those small compromises compound into structural weakness. If something is off by 2%, you correct it. If communication is unclear, you refine it. If a process is inefficient, you rebuild it. Not later. Immediately. This intensity isn't about perfectionism. Perfectionism is fear disguised as quality control. Radical standards are about velocity and durability. You aim high not to look impressive, but to reduce long-term friction. A system built with extreme care performs with less maintenance. There's also a psychological shift. When excellence becomes the minimum requirement, identity changes. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start asking, "How do I do this better?" The question evolves from possibility to optimization. Environments shape behavior. If you surround yourself with low expectations, your brain conserves energy. It does the least required to remain acceptable. But when the baseline is high, your brain adapts upward. It expands capacity to survive the pressure. Pressure is not the enemy. Inconsistent pressure is. Radical standards create consistent pressure. You always know what's required. There's no guessing. That predictability builds resilience. Another element is ownership. When standards are extreme, blame becomes irrelevant. You don't search for excuses, you search for solutions. If something breaks, you fix it. If you don't know how, you learn. Accountability stops being punitive and becomes structural. High standards also filter people. Some will opt out. They'll call it intense, unrealistic, unnecessary. That's fine. Radical standards are not democratic. They are selective by design. The goal is not mass approval, it's exceptional output. And here's the paradox. Extreme expectations create freedom. When everyone operates at a high level, trust increases, micromanagement decreases. You don't need constant supervision because competence is proven repeatedly. Credibility builds autonomy. Average environments require layers of oversight because performance is unpredictable. Radical environments simplify hierarchy. When excellence is normal, coordination becomes efficient. This philosophy extends beyond work. It applies to thinking, to health, to relationships. You don't allow your mindset to drift into cynicism. You don't allow your habits to erode discipline. You don't allow your circle to normalize complacency. It's a refusal to dilute potential. And potential is dangerous if unmanaged. Without high standards, potential becomes talk. It becomes plans that never materialize. It becomes ideas that never survive execution. Radical standards convert ambition into structure. They demand iteration. They demand feedback loops. They demand constant improvement without emotional drama. Most people wait for motivation. Radical standards operate regardless of mood. You perform because that is who you decided to be, not because conditions feel ideal. When excellence becomes the baseline, average becomes unacceptable, not because it's immoral, but because it wastes capacity. And wasted capacity is the real failure, not falling short. But choosing to operate below what you are engineered to achieve when you refuse to negotiate with the version of yourself that settles for less. Future-oriented thinking requires detachment from the present comfort most people cling to. The average mind optimizes for stability. It asks, how do I protect what I have? The builder's mind asks, what needs to exist that doesn't yet? That shift alone separates consumers from architects. The future is not an extension of today, it's a disruption of it. If your thinking is limited to incremental improvement, you'll produce incremental results. But if you question foundational assumptions, you unlock exponential change. Most systems persist not because they're optimal, but because they're familiar. Future-oriented individuals challenge familiarity. They examine industries, habits, technologies, and even social norms. With one filter, is this the best possible version, or just the current version? That question destabilizes complacency. It forces analysis instead of acceptance. This way of thinking requires imagination anchored in logic. It's not fantasy, it's structured speculation. You look at data, trends, physics, human behavior, and project trajectories. You identify constraints, then ask which of them are real and which are inherited limitations. A real constraint is physics. An inherited limitation is belief. Future builders distinguish between the two. They don't waste time fighting gravity, but they will absolutely redesign a system that people assume is permanent. There's also a tolerance for uncertainty. The future has no guarantees. When you operate ahead of the curve, validation is delayed. Most people need social proof before they commit energy. By the time something is obvious, it's crowded. If you're serious about building what doesn't exist yet, you must act before consensus forms. That requires conviction grounded in reasoning, not emotion. You calculate risk. You don't avoid it. Another component is long-term orientation. Short-term rewards are seductive. Immediate feedback feels good, but transformative projects rarely deliver instant gratification. They require sustained effort without applause. Future-oriented thinking stretches your time horizon. You make decisions today that may not pay off for years. You invest in skills that are not yet mainstream. You position yourself where demand will eventually rise. This isn't guesswork, it's pattern recognition. Every major shift follows signals. Technological acceleration. resource constraints, demographic changes, cultural evolution. If you study these forces carefully, you begin to see gaps forming. Gaps are opportunities. But seeing a gap isn't enough. You must act decisively. The future rewards speed combined with preparation. If you hesitate too long, someone else builds what you envisioned. There's also an internal dimension. Future-oriented people redesign themselves continuously. They don't anchor identity to past achievements. What worked 5 years ago may be obsolete tomorrow. Adaptability becomes a core skill. This adaptability is not reactive panic. It's proactive upgrading. You deliberately place yourself in environments that stretch your thinking. You seek information that contradicts your assumptions. You evolve faster than circumstances force you to. Comfort is the enemy of foresight. When everything feels stable, urgency disappears. But stability is often temporary. Systems shift gradually, then suddenly. If you're not anticipating the shift, you become a casualty of it. Building what doesn't exist also requires resilience against criticism. Innovative ideas initially look unreasonable. People measure them against current standards, not future potential. If you rely on present validation, you'll abandon bold concepts too early. You must be willing to look wrong temporarily to be right eventually. Future-oriented thinking transforms obstacles into design challenges. Instead of saying, "This can't work," you ask, "What would need to change for this to work?" That question keeps possibility alive without ignoring reality. It's a disciplined optimism, not blind hope, not naive enthusiasm. Structured belief, backed by execution. The most important element is responsibility. If you see a better future clearly, ignoring it becomes a choice. Vision creates obligation. You cannot unsee inefficiency. You cannot unrecognize potential. And once you accept that responsibility, you stop waiting for someone else to initiate change. You realize the future is not a destination you arrive at. It is a structure you construct through deliberate decisions, made today with the courage to prioritize tomorrow over the comfort of remaining anchored to a present that was never designed to remain permanent. Emotion feels productive because it creates intensity. You feel inspired, motivated, energized. But emotion without execution produces nothing tangible. It's internal movement without external change. The world doesn't respond to what you feel. It responds to what you build. Ideas are abundant. Vision statements are easy. Talking about disruption is fashionable. But translating thought into structure requires friction. It requires sustained measurable action, repeated long after the initial excitement fades. Most people overestimate the power of clarity and underestimate the power of repetition. You can understand exactly what needs to be done and still fail if you don't move consistently. Execution is not glamorous, it's procedural, often boring, frequently uncomfortable. That's why action must be prioritized over emotion. Emotion fluctuates, discipline doesn't. When you rely on how you feel, your output becomes inconsistent. A good day produces progress. A difficult day produces delay. Over time, inconsistency compounds into mediocrity. Action-based systems eliminate that volatility. You perform because it's scheduled, structured, and required. Execution also exposes reality. In theory, everything works. In conversation, strategies sound flawless. But once you begin building, flaws appear, assumptions collapse, constraints surface. That feedback is invaluable. You cannot refine what you haven't tested. Action turns speculation into data, and data sharpens intelligence. There's a brutal honesty in execution. It doesn't care about your confidence level. If the product fails, it fails. If the strategy works, it works. Results are indifferent to self-perception. This indifference is useful. It removes ego from the equation. Instead of defending an idea emotionally, you iterate based on evidence. You adjust quickly because your identity isn't tied to being right, it's tied to making progress. Another advantage of action is momentum. Movement creates psychological leverage. When you see tangible progress, motivation increases naturally. You don't need to manufacture inspiration. It emerges from evidence of forward motion. Inaction does the opposite. It breeds doubt. The longer you delay, the heavier the task feels. Complexity grows in your imagination. Fear expands in the absence of data. Action compresses fear. It shrinks uncertainty by confronting it directly. Speed matters here. Not reckless speed, but decisive speed. If you spend months refining a plan without launching anything, you're optimizing fantasy. Controlled experimentation beats prolonged speculation. Small steps taken early outperform perfect plans executed late. Execution also reveals commitment. It's easy to claim ambition. It's difficult to sacrifice comfort for it. Action demands trade-offs: time, energy, leisure, convenience. You can't build at a high level while protecting every comfort. This is where many people stall. They want transformation without disruption. But construction is disruptive by nature. It rearranges priorities. It consumes attention. It challenges identity. Consistent action requires systems. You design routines that make progress automatic. You define clear metrics. You reduce decision fatigue by pre-committing to behaviors. You treat productivity like engineering, not like mood management. There's also resilience in execution. When setbacks occur, action-oriented individuals respond with iteration instead of introspection paralysis. They ask what failed, adjust variables, and move again. They don't spiral into self-doubt because their focus is on correction, not self-judgment. Emotion can still exist. Passion is powerful. Vision is essential. But neither substitutes for output. They are fuel, not machinery. Without machinery, fuel burns out. Ultimately, reality rewards those who convert abstract ambition into measurable progress. You don't get credit for potential energy. Only kinetic energy changes systems. The difference between dreaming and building is simple but unforgiving. Builders move, repeatedly, relentlessly, even when they're tired, even when excitement fades, even when the outcome is uncertain. Because they understand something fundamental. The future does not respond to how intensely you believe in it. It responds to the structures you construct, the problems you solve, and the consistent, disciplined actions you take long after the emotion that sparked the vision has disappeared and only commitment remains to carry it forward. Here's the truth. Choosing only 3 people was never about exclusivity. It was about intensity. When the circle is small, the standard rises. When the standard rises, execution sharpens. When execution sharpens, the future bends. If you're on the list, it means you don't get to live casually anymore. You don't get to scroll past your potential. You don't get to negotiate with your excuses. You don't get to dilute your ambition to stay comfortable. Because comfort never built anything remarkable. The world doesn't change because millions agree. It changes because a few decide. A few who focus. A few who accept responsibility. A few who refuse average. A few who move without waiting to feel ready. That's the pattern. Every breakthrough started small. Every revolution began with a handful of people who were willing to carry disproportionate pressure. Not louder, not luckier, just more committed. So if you're watching this, understand something. Being chosen is not a reward. It's a weight, and weight builds strength. If you lift it, you're not here to spectate. You're not here to be inspired for 5 minutes and then drift back into routine. You're here to build, to execute, to redesign, to push, to endure. 3 people, 0 excuses, infinite responsibility. That's the agreement. Now the only question left is simple. Will you rise to the lev? L, you've been chosen or prove you never belonged on the list in the first place. Build something that makes the future unavoidable. I'll see you there.